Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 5.5 of Link Click. I don't know why they didn't just call it episode 6. They made it an OVA, but they've sandwiched it between episodes 5 and episode 6, which is curious because this show replaced Violet Evergarden, and not only did Violet Evergarden's OVA come between episode 5 and 6, weird coincidence, but also I just sobbed my eyes out at episode 5 of Link Click, and I've sobbed my eyes out in Violet Evergarden. So what a fitting replacement. I do think that's odd that episode 5.5, that the OVA comes smack dab in between those two episodes, because it's the exact same for Violet Evergarden. A very weird coincidence, but last episode was so good. That 3-episode arc of episodes 3, 4, and 5 were so wonderful. I was like, oh my gosh. They were fantastic. And so I've been told that as a nice little breather in between episode 5 and episode 6, there's this OVA. It is a little bit shorter. It's only like 21 minutes. It's a little bit shorter than the other episodes, but after that episode, I need it. I really do. I was like, oh my gosh. So, because yeah, what a poor Cheng. But yeah, so this is its own total story. It's called Marrying by Contesting. I don't know what that means, but it is its own little side story, this OVA. And so I'm curious why they put this OVA in between episodes 5 and 6. And y'all were pretty adamant that I needed to watch this before going into episode 6. I'm like, okay, so it's its own standalone story, but I'm curious if we find anything out in it that will have bearing for future episodes. And I did want to make a few notes. I had a couple notes from the last episodes that y'all have pointed out, and I'm sure as they come onto YouTube, because I'm recording this a little bit ahead, that I'll note that as well. I did think it was really, really cool how a lot of you pointed out that other reactors and how those that are from China watching episodes 4 and 5 could instantly figure out the twist of when and where this took place, the whole earthquake, because one of you pointed out that the accents by the characters in the region pointed out to the location. I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought about the accents and the location, if that would give it a hint. That was a really cool note. And then Sarah Linda pointed out that one reactor, they noted the cloud formations during the whole bike ride home were signals that there was going to be an earthquake. And I'm like, oh, where I live at, there are no earthquakes, not really. So we're not on like a seismic plate or anything. So I never know. I had no clue that was an indicator. So I'm like, oh, it kind of reminds me of like I am from an area that has strong thunderstorms and tornadoes and things like that. So you can kind of tell like line 1 winds, things like that. The cloud formations can kind of tell you that as well. So that was really interesting. But also, there was a really cool comment that pointed this out, that Cheng inhabiting these bodies of these characters, the memories start to meld between him and the other person. So there's a really cool kind of meta thing where as Cheng melds into the memories of the people that he inhabits for the missions and the photos, it's kind of like a cool meta representation of us, the audience, watching, and that we kind of meld our own memories with the characters in the show. And that's kind of like a meta commentary on when we watch shows and we read stories, we kind of mold our own memories along with those of the characters that we relate to. And I was like, that's a really cool commentary. That's a really cool connection. I don't know if it's intentional with the show or not, but that's really neat. I like it. So yeah, just some really, really cool things that y'all have pointed out with episodes 4 and 5 that I wanted to make note of. And I'm sure I'll make note as we go on if any of you have any really interesting comments I want to bring up. But, oh my gosh, this series. This series has gotten so good so fast. Episodes 3, 4, and 5 were amazing. I'm excited to see this OVA, and then I'm excited, albeit really nervous, to dive into episode 6 after this, the week after this. So let's not waste any more time though, shall we? We're gonna watch this episode and then talk about it. So yeah, Marrying by Contesting, episode 5.5 of Link Click. Let's do this. We are gonna watch this here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, y'all. You guys were like, oh, this is the happy episode. I'm like, I mean, it wasn't sad necessarily, but it was so, what a love story. I'm a big sucker for romance. I'm a big sucker for a love story. I really am. A good love story. Not a cheesy like Hallmark rom-com necessarily. Like if it's cheesy and cliche, I'm like, ah. But stuff like this, I'm like, oh, I'll eat it up for days. Just, I like that the idea of them going into this photograph, it kind of ties back to episode 3, where it was like, to lose, not to win. The idea was that they weren't going to figure out what the move was. That wasn't Rin's goal. Her goal was to get them to go in the photograph and relate to this guy, to Siwin, and get his whole perspective. And then she can be like, oh, well, you didn't figure it out. That's okay, because he's still alive and we can still help him. And it's like, oh. And then them helping him up the mountain to get to the dad. Now, the grandfather, the dojo master, or the fact that Siwin opened his own dojo up and everything, so he clearly knew martial arts enough to open his own dojo. And it sounded like that they ended up getting together regardless. Yeah. Okay. So I love the twist. Well, first of all, the twist that the one guy was not the brother. He was one of the students that wanted to marry her. And then the twist that he gave up. He could never beat the master, so rather than keep trying, he gave up and left. And he said the love wasn't worth it. But Siwin stayed because he loved her enough. He kept fighting. And at the very end, I like that Lu, our white-haired protagonist, confronts the dojo master. He's like, why did you have to wait until now to let go? And he says, even my grandchild is going overseas for competition. Oh. As the father, he couldn't even defeat the child's grandfather. Oh, how was I supposed to approve of him? Oh, I say. Okay, people often ponder, what's the hardest thing about love? So I guess that these two still stuck together and they had a kid regardless, but he never let them marry. He never gave his blessing, his approval for them to get married. But they had a kid, clearly, and the kid is now competing overseas and everything. He's like, the kid's father couldn't even beat the grandfather, so how could I let them do it? Okay. It was just like him, just the idea of them being married wasn't getting approved. I love it. And I love that she like protected him when he was a kid, and then he fell in love with her, and then he just stuck by her side. Like that's a love story for the ages. And he just kept climbing up that mountain to face him every year, even after he said no, but they still got together and had a kid in the end. Oh, it's so damn sweet. I love it. I love that this also shows that Lu tries to play off that he's not, emotional or empathetic or anything, but he is. Lu is. Like, Cheng is our empath. Cheng is like full-blown emotional. He relates to all the people that he inhabits for the missions. He like has all these emotions and feelings, and he's the character that relates a lot to these other characters. And Lu passes himself off as being really cold and distant. But as we see here, it's like, nah, he's really like compassionate like Cheng is, just doesn't show it as openly. And I like them playing the video game at the beginning, and Lu's like, I don't hit girls. It's like, okay. But then later on in the episode, he's telling Cheng how to fight in the moment and how to use his, to fight against the master, and he's using all the moves and everything. It's like, yeah, you probably could have, you just didn't want to. So I love that. That's so sweet. And I love their banter. And the ancient block phone, it's like, okay, the ancient block phone and all that. Which I'm curious when this is set, because it's clearly set in the future, but it's the block phone and stuff, it's not been that long since they've been out. So that's the one aspect about it, like technology-wise, like that's the one aspect, like how far, because 2008 wasn't that long ago. That one thing I'm like, it's not been that long ago. Smartphones, like the block phones, haven't been out that long. So that's the one aspect about the show. At the end, I was like, wait a minute. He has like the block phone, but the block phones like that were like early 2000s, and it's only been like 20 years. They haven't aged that much, right? So that's interesting. That's the only part of the episode I was kind of weirded out by the timeline, because I was like, this is clearly taking place now, currently, like in 2020, but the block phones that they're using are like early 2000s, so it's really only been 20 years. It's not been that long. So I was like, wait a minute. No, they'd only be like in their like 40s, not looking like they're 70. But oh well. Oh well. It's minor. It's a minor thing. Yeah, poor Cheng bearing the brunt of all this. In all this, showing that he's like, I'm the one that has to do all the manual labor here. You just get to eat and sleep and do all this. But I love this as a standalone episode. And just even as a standalone, even as an OVA, the writing's so good. And the little twists and turns at the end. It went by so quickly. I was like, oh man, this went by so fast. I was not prepared for it to already be over. But I love the animation again. The animation in this series is amazing. It's so flawless. It's like perfect from end to end. I love the animation in this. It's just great. It's really good. I like it. The fluidity of the movement, the animation. At times it looked a little bit different than it has in past episodes, so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, this series. And y'all telling me this is the good episode. Okay. Great. But I really did like it. And I don't understand the photos at the end because I can't read Chinese. I don't know. I'm wondering if the photos are relating back to episodes 3 through 5 because some of you commented that people send in photos with like captions and stuff on them. So I'm curious if you do know Chinese or if you know what the heck is up with those, explaining what the deal with the photos are. That would be good to know. But yeah, I also love that Rin talks about taking self-defense classes because she talks about going and investigating like a string of murders in the area. And she's like, I need to be taking some self-defense classes. I was like, yeah, that's kind of ominous. And y'all said that I needed to watch this episode before the rest of the series. I'm a little worried for her character if that's the case, because that's a little ominous and creepy. I don't like that. The only thing I can get of why watching it between episodes 5 and 6 is to get a little bit more insight into Lu's character and that he is compassionate and empathetic. He just doesn't want to show it. To get a little bit more into Cheng's character, but also to know that note that Cheng said to him at the end, where he was like, where he talked about the idea of like changing the future, and he's like, I knew from the photo that things weren't going to change. He's like, but this is not the future. This is the present. We're helping out in the present. Right? So they can do that. They can interact with things in the present timeline because they're not going to affect the past or the future. I mean, they are going to affect the future, but them helping him up to that point. Aw. It's so damn sweet. I love it. And I like that Lu hears this from the father. I like it. That Lu's getting this insight, showing that Lu is caring about what happens to these people. Because, from episode 1, when that thing happens to Emma, Lu seems kind of distant, like he doesn't care. But then from this episode, you realize, no, Lu does care what happens to these people. He just is very much under the understanding that they can't change the past. So he has to accept it. He may not like it, but he has to accept it. And that maybe that's a thing, too, going forward with the series, is that he's going to be interacting with Cheng and talking to him, and we, the audience, need to know that Lu is very aware and very compassionate towards people, but he's also very aware of the rules of how this power has to work and that they can't change the past because it could open up Pandora's box and, alter the fabric of time and space. Nothing big, right? But, oh man, I really liked this episode. And I really liked, Cheng was starting adding his own lines there, and Lu was like, stop. But yeah, you could tell that I like the idea that Cheng also feels the emotions of these characters that he interacts with. He feels their emotions. And so if they like someone, Cheng feels that too. So that's interesting. But yeah, this was a really good episode. This is a great OVA. I loved this. The little twist at the end of them being older and still him going back day after day. My jam indeed. So yeah, next week it's going to be back to business. We're halfway through the series at this point. Next episode's gonna be the halfway point already. And then I was gonna say that y'all have said that there's a Chibi series. I found out there's a Chibi series that's airing right now after this, and they've announced a season 2 of Link Click. So obviously we're gonna watch season 2 when it comes out. Obviously. But I am excited that we have this Chibi series. So after I'm done with Link Click, we will watch the Chibi series, which I don't know how many episodes there's going to be total yet. It may be something like I've done for Modao Zushi Q and Bungo Stray Dogs, where in both of those series, there was like, in Bungo Stray Dogs 1, there were 12 episodes, and so I just did 3 episodes in 4 chunks. And I'll probably do the same for this series, unless they're like really big episodes. So, we shall see. But in the meantime, I really liked this OVA. It was great. I am curious to know your thoughts down below of what y'all thought of it as well. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 6 of Link Click. Bye.